Welcome back to the Gem Cutter's Craft. This is Justin K. Prim, and we are at the Gem Show in Arizona. So I thought for this adventure we needed a guide, so we're meeting up with Dave Garcia, aka Lapidary Dave in the YouTube world. What's up, Dave?
Doing good.
Where are we at right now?
Quartzsite, the PowWow show.
So tell me a little bit about the PowWow show.
It's one of the larger American gem shows. Unlike Denver and Tucson, it's actually kind of more like a mom and pop show. So a lot of miners, a lot of folks actually cutting the things that they're selling at their booths, people actually mining the things at their booths. Really affordable prices compared to some other venues. Definitely somewhere worth coming and taking time to make friends with the vendors because you can get contacts and they can supply you all year round. It is a must. And it's right before Tucson. So if you have time to go to Tucson, you should definitely make time to come to Quartzsite.
Cool, so let's check out some of the vendors.
We are at the Mexican fire agate booth with the Velasco family. These are Aguascalientes fire agates, one of my all-time favorite materials. I'm in love with this stuff. And it's probably one of the most lucrative materials for artists. Because it's all your skill level. You can buy a $5 piece of Mexican fire agate and you can cut a $40, $50, $60, $75 cabochon, or if you take the time to learn contour carving, you could take that $5, $10 piece of agate and make a $400, $500, $600 stone. And so much like opals, Mexican fire agates have particularly desirable and more rare colors, where opals, I believe, red, well, in opals, blue is a common color, and fire agates, purple and blue are one of the rarer colors, I believe, right? A lot of American cutters, because they're not particularly as good as Mexican cutters, they'll settle on greens, which are beautiful. The reds are beautiful, the golds are beautiful, but people who are in the know, they want the blue, they want the purple. And sometimes you can get teal, like a light blue, which is, I think, probably one of the hardest to get. I spent a lot of time in Mexico growing up. I grew up with my grandparents in Zacatecas, Mexico, and I just always loved Mexican material. But also usually being on a budget, fire agates was a great way for me to make money fast. Still is, and for a lot of people, you know. And it's one of those materials you can buy a $1 piece, make a $40 cab, but you can also buy a $500 piece of rough and make a $20, $30 1,000 piece.
Damn.
It's a great media for normal cutters like me. So my pride and joy, my bread and butter, turquoise. I live in the Southwest. Turquoise pays the bills. I love all turquoise, Mexican, Persian, Russian, American, and I love Chinese. Unfortunately, Chinese turquoise has a bad reputation because of a lot of brainwashing, you know, cheap Chinese this, cheap Chinese that, but it's all from Mother Earth. It's just, you know, it's as beautiful, if not even better than some American turquoise. Hubei Mountain and the Tibetan turquoise is actually some of my favorite turquoise in the entire industry. Huge history. A lot of people don't know that the Tibetans actually have just as big as of a turquoise culture as Native Americans, such as the Dene, Hopi, and Zuni. A lot of the same traditions, like giving their children turquoise shortly after birth and holding on to it their whole life. Really, really cool stuff. And this is McKay Anderson, my favorite turquoise dealer.
What kind of a turquoise are we looking at here? What's this one?
This is Morenci 2. This is from Mexico, sometimes called Nacazari, but there can be one mine with dozens of different variations. For instance, the number 8 turquoise mine supposedly has over 30 different variations, and it can look like many different varieties. Like this can come in a darker blue, and if you didn't write down what it was, you might just think that these are 2 different turquoise mines from 2 different places. They say the Kingman mine has over 40, maybe 50 different variations. Chinese turquoise, or roughly, you know, the generic term Chinese turquoise, dozens and dozens and dozens, and I love that about turquoise. It's pretty lucrative in the United States. You can spend, well, I'll tell you exactly what I do. I buy this material from McKay for $2 per gram, and I sell it for between $5 and $12 a carat. And the beauty about turquoise is I don't have to hide that I'm paying $2 a gram. Turquoise is a good conduit for selling your art. A good dome, a good girdle, actually polishing the back, a superior polish. You're not just selling the stone with this material. It's actually not that expensive, especially for the stuff that you cut. I love everything about turquoise. I love the way it smells when I cut it. I love the way it feels on my finger, the mud. A lot of people are into crystal medicine and stuff, and they always ask me, hey, what do you think about this or that? And I can't really say yes or no, but when I cut turquoise, it literally makes me happy. Maybe it's because I know money's coming because I just cut an expensive stone, but it totally
There's something about the color too, right? I mean, people have been fixated on this kind of a teal, copper rich.
It has to be. I think it's just probably because it's incredibly rare in nature. It's primal, right?
Yeah.
We know what we're afraid of at birth before we ever even see certain things. I think maybe we know we love this and crave this color at birth, even though now in the modern world we see it everywhere, or especially artificially. But you know what's funny? I can't tell you what turquoise smells like and tastes like. Can't describe it, but what I can tell you is people ask me, they'll send me a picture of their chrysocolla and they'll say, is this turquoise? Or if I see it in person, I can smell it or lick it, and I swear to goodness, chrysocolla has a sour taste that turquoise never does. However, you can get chrysocolla and turquoise mixed. It's extremely rare. I almost never talk about it because people out watching this video are gonna be like, I knew it. I knew I have a bunch of turquoise in my backyard. Unfortunately, when people ask me to identify the turquoise, more often than not, I have to tell them that's not turquoise.
Okay, so this is a totally different kind of thing than the other booths that we've seen. So what are we looking at here?
These are vintage machines, which I absolutely love. I collect vintage machines like people collect vintage cars. Even if they don't work, some people have old Ford trucks rotting away in the yard. I have old Highland Parks, Loritones, Beacon Stars, Star Diamond, Raytech. Even if I don't use them, I want them all. Even these old ones, they never not have a place. And the wheel arrangement on some of these old ones, you'll see a lot of them have 4 wheels. And that's because back in the day, not only were they using stone wheels, which is it's considered obsolete, which it's not, by the way, it's a trade secret. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But they also are using silicon carbide belts. Back in the day, a lot of people were cutting agates and jaspers and cutting anything that they can find pretty much. And they usually only took things to 600 grit before they would use the side mounts for cerium oxide. And you would get a mirror polish just from that if you did it the right way.
So how old do you think these are?
This one, it looks maybe 1976.
Okay.
This is an old Highland Park, casted out of aluminum. These are fantastic. They will outlive us all. You might have to replace the motor 5 or 6 times in a lifetime, but it was just incredible. Even though a lot of people don't prefer this 2-stone wheel, 2 silicon carbide belt style, this would still cost more money than like something like a Diamond Pacific Genie or the modern Highland Park C8 to manufacture. So these are treasures.
And so what is the other one? This is just a different kind of version of the same?
I think this is a Star Diamond or a Beacon Star. But again, designed to use 2 stone wheels in the middle, and you kind of only need 1 expandable. The reason why this one has 2, because you take the belts off the side. I'm not gonna do it, but you can just take the belts off the side. The reason why this one was designed for 2 is because back in the day, you would use something called a bumper wheel, where the silicon carbide belt didn't easily slip on and off. So it was better to have 2 of them since you can't just slide them on and off. Most people replace it for the modern expandable belt. But yeah, still to this day, silicon carbide does not come much finer than 600 grit because silicon carbide will break down and become a finer grit. And at 1000 grit, it's already so fine. By the time it breaks down 10 times faster than like 220, 400, 600 mesh. So it's kind of, you don't really need it because you can use a worn out 600 mesh silicon carbide belt as your 1200, as your modern 3000. We were talking to some fine Mexican folks earlier. They use silicon carbide. You do not throw the belts away. A worn out 600 grit can eventually be like a 14,000 grit mesh. I love it. It's an old timer secret. Silicon carbide for agates and jaspers. Ton of heat, tons of pressure. You dig into that stone. Some stones like jade want to be hot. The silicon carbide stone wheels, which are considered obsolete by a lot of people, are beloved by some people who cut agates and jaspers. Usually these come in 100 mesh and 200 mesh. And these are awesome because if you grind a stone with an 80 grit diamond wheel, it's gonna leave these powdery scratches. Where when you use a stone wheel at the same mesh, it's leaving a satin finish. You're eliminating a lot of wheels and a lot of time to get rid of these deep scratches. I love them. You have to true them up. You have to resurface them. But you can also take like an old flat lap, grind into the stone wheel, and shape your silicon carbide hard wheel if you want to do any kind of contour carving or anything like that.
We saw how to do cabs and thinking a little bit about polishing, but what's this one for?
This is an old slab saw. This is an old 10-inch. It's probably a lore tone or a star diamond, maybe a phantom.
So one of the things that I've been seeing since I've been here and some of the other shows in Quartzsite, there's so many old machines, like maybe even going back to the 40s and 50s, that still look like they're being used. And this is something that we don't really see in faceting world. Nobody's using machines that are more than 20 years old. So how does that work?
The technology has barely changed since the 40s.
And it seems like they're pretty beefy. I mean, a lot of this stuff is kind of almost homemade looking, right? I mean, the bases, setting up the motor and stuff.
This wood here is homemade. This vise is homemade. There's just really not a lot of tech in slabbing, trimming, and cabbing. I think the biggest difference between the 1940s cabber and the 2023 cabber is the use of diamond impregnated resin wheels and diamond plated and diamond sintered more aggressive wheels for hogging out the stone. Yeah, and that started about the late 60s, early 70s, I believe.
And so this is just basically your first step. This is taking your rough, sawing it into slabs so then you can do your cabs?
Yeah, and let's see. So this one, is it an automatic? No, this one's a hand crank, I think. Yeah, that's.
So you're gonna put your stone into the vise.
Yeah.
Put this down so you're not getting sprayed with oil.
You crank it.
And then it'll just, okay. So this is like a really simple version, because a lot of times it has an automatic cranker, right?
Right, this one might have had an automatic cranker with a motor in the front. My favorite of all time saws that I don't use, unfortunately, is when they're gravity fed. They'll literally old timers will drill a hole in the back, put a rope connecting the vise, which is free moving, and they'll know exactly how much weight to put in that bucket that's tied to the rope to pull on the vise to cut the stone. And they can feel the stone, they know how much weight, because it's a formula. You want so much weight, but not too much weight where you're bogging down the motor or putting abuse on the blade, but just enough weight to where it's gonna cut as fast as possible. And then a good slabber is thinking about the finish that's actually coming off the blade. It's not just cutting the rock, but a good saw can leave a finish similar to 220, 600, sometimes even higher grit. And that saves time for the person who is gonna be using that slab afterwards. And I just noticed that. So maybe it's not a hand cranker, and maybe
they attach it on.
Yeah, and this is obviously not the way it came, and this is probably an auto feed.
But that was the cool thing about then, because the way it came would have just been some parts that you kind of had it was almost like a kit. Yeah. All of the stuff back then was like a kit, and you would have your own idea about how you're gonna set it up based on your own taste, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've seen illustrations of this kind of bucket and rope thing in these old, 40s and 50s books. This is definitely what they were talking about way back in the day. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see an old time one. What do you think, $275? Is it a deal, or is
That's a very good deal.
I love that, like the knowledge and the technique of the old timers is still something that you would use today, because I love that knowledge.
A lot of folks, they do that because they learned that way. I learned the modern way, and I found out that the old way is better for almost everything when it comes to cabbing and slabbing. That's why the technology hasn't changed, just the base metals have changed. They're not using aluminum anymore. They're using stainless steels. They're using cheap mild steels, which has to be powder coated. One of my favorite things that folks will do is they'll buy these and they'll repurpose them. They'll paint them the original colors. There's like that forest green Highland Park. There's that baby blue Lore tone. There's the dark blue star diamond. And they'll take the time to make it the same color that they remember back in the 60s.
Yeah,
and stuff.
I love seeing people that are refurbishing them and then showing off the work, the before and after photos.
You know, it's a huge shame that Lapidary Journal doesn't exist anymore, because that magazine would show you how to make your own slab saw, how to make your own flat laps, how to make your own cabbing machines. Even though I'm sponsored by one of the biggest cabbing machines in the industry, I still teach people how to do that on my YouTube channel. You could take an old tile saw, put it sideways, put a flat lap disc on there if you can't afford a high tech, because if you get cutting, you're gonna fall in love with the art. Then you're gonna make the money to buy the fancier machines.
So whatever way you have to get in, it's worthy.
Yep, and I can tell this one's aged by, you gotta smell it. It was cut with diesel.
Oh wow.
They used diesel as the lubricant. And when I worked for Highland Park, an Australian gentleman came up to me and he said he just burned down his shop for the second time. It burned down twice from using diesel. And some people think, oh, it's cheap lubricant, but some people think that it's a superior viscosity for what stones they're cutting. I think on the finer points of slabbing, different viscosities is actually something to think about when it comes to lubricants.
And just as you were mentioning old lapidary journals, there they are, lapidary journals and rockin' gems. So not only are you getting old machines, but you can actually find the resources, as you were saying, to build your own machine or see what was going on in 1975.
So these were towards the end of Lapidary Journal. These are pretty awesome. I think they ended in 2009 or 2001, I can't remember. These are sweet, but at this point in American cabbing and cutting, the machine companies were already established. There was dozens of them. So they won't really, by this point, teach you how to make your own machines, where these babies here, these are the ones I crave. This one's from 1985.
This one's 75, so you got an even more.
75. And sometimes you can pay $15 each for these. Sometimes you can buy a big stack of these wrapped in cellophane for $10. There's a woman right here in Quartzsite.
$1 each, so.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, that's about as cheap as I've seen them this whole year.
I bet you they would take $10 for all of them. As you can see old prices of what, and they won't even show sometimes it won't even show the material. It'll just say, opals from Ethiopia. You know, it's 12 cents an ounce.
Just on the description.
Yeah, and you have to just trust them. Or they'd probably mail you a photo from across the world.
So here people are finding out about the new technology, new saw blades, new faceting machine. So where are we now?
Cutting edge supply.
And we got more gear. This one is extra exciting for me, vintage old faceting machines. Most of the stuff I've seen in Quartzsite has just been cabbing stuff or saws or whatever, and then I stumbled upon this booth, which is not an accident because they're friends of mine, but I didn't know that there was going to be vintage faceting machines.
What do you think they were working here?
I don't know. Maybe it's glass. It's pretty big, and I see like I think I see bubbles. I don't know what that white stuff is. Have you dabbled into faceting much? Have you tried it?
A little bit. My grandfather has an Ultratech digital. Don't know which one, maybe a 5 or something?
Yeah, V5.
And I was gonna learn from a gentleman in Albuquerque Facetors Guild. When I met him, he was faceting some kind of salt crystal, maybe halide or something.
Okay, yeah.
And he said he would saturate the water with as much salt as he could, otherwise it would just melt away.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it's pretty weird, I think.
Aside from the vintage faceting machines, what else are we seeing over here?
Supplies for cabbing, cutting, and faceting. Diamond Pacific wheels, considered the best in the industry.
And I see they also have a bunch of gear loose stuff over here, which is from the faceting world stuff that everybody loves.
This, I think we were chatting about this at dinner yesterday. Is this like that chapstick stuff you'd put on a lap?
Exactly. Yeah, they got all kinds of different ones, and even some vintage old laps, including there's a Nubon down here. I know people, I never really got into them, but people go crazy for the Nubons. They're kind of rare because like they don't make them anymore.
So you have to find them in the wild.
You have to get old ones like this. This one is, I don't know, it's worn off. You can't see what mesh it was, but people love these. I never use them, so I'll let it be and let someone else have a treasure find. And so here we got another cache of vintage machines, 70s Ultratechs, old, very old Lee machine with a funky bass. I think this might be a custom modification speed controller or something.
What's going on with this lap? Is
yeah, this is the Ripple. I think it's called a Ripple disc.
To be random?
I think so. I've never actually used one, but I've seen them. Yeah, I think it's just the texture does something. It cuts them faster or something like that. I'm not totally sure what the philosophy is. That's also kind of it's not like old school, but it's like 80s old school or something like that. But yeah, a few more cool faceting machines. So thank you, Dave. It's been awesome to get a tour with you, and I hope all you guys liked it. And this has been Justin Prim and Lapidary Dave, and I'll see you next time on the Gem Cutter's Craft.